I'm Bob Thomas. I'm a professor at Loyola University, and I'm a member of the advisory board of the Center for the Study of New Orleans at Loyola. I'm sitting here today in the lieutenant's room of the Rex Den, a fascinating place, with my good friend, Dr. Stephen Hales, who's a local pediatrician, the Rex Archivist, a Rex official, and has recently written a most fascinating book entitled Rex, An Illustrated History of the School of Design. Today we'd kind of like to explore a few of the great stories you've got in there so that locals can better understand the Rex organization. And it's exactly what everybody calls it, the Rex Organization. Tell me about the School of Design.
You know, it's lost in the mists of history, I suspect, but the original founders of the organization picked that name in which to incorporate the Rex Organization. So it is the official name, although everybody knows it by Rex, or the Rex Organization. I like to think that the founders not only used those words to describe the mission of design of a beautiful parade and a beautiful spectacle, but also something that had a larger purpose. So the School of Design works in lots of ways. We actually have had a long and ongoing relationship with schools in this city, and many have seen an educational opportunity within the Carnival celebration, so maybe they were thinking about that too.
Exactly. I mean, you're one of the founding members of the Pro Bono Publico Foundation that's run by the Rex Organization that really makes incredible educational contributions to our community.
You know, the first carnival after Katrina and the flooding, as we came back to the city, was a remarkable time. I don't think any of us will ever forget that carnival. For a long time there were discussions of whether that would happen or not, whether it should happen, whether the city was ready for it. And many said, how can we not? This is who we are, this is how we celebrate who we are and our history, and to tell the world that we're here. So when that decision was finally made, we put together our parade, even though it had been flooded by 4 or 5 feet of water here at the Den. And we did have a beautiful parade that day. But we saw opportunities beyond that, especially in our public schools. As schools came together after the storm, they took a completely different form. Charter schools, now educating over 70% of our children, became the focus of an opportunity for us to invest, both in terms of volunteer efforts and in terms of money. We raised money, we placed volunteers on charter school boards with other organizations. But the foundation grew out of that. Pro Bono Publico Foundation, of course, takes its name from the motto of the Rex Organization, Pro Bono Publico, for the public good. That goes back to the founding too. And over the years since the storm, we have given grants in excess of $600,000, $350,000 in the last grant cycle. It's become a major force investing in charter schools and the organizations helping the remarkable work going on in the city right now. I mean, who would have thought New Orleans would be the epicenter of school reform and a model for urban school reform in this country? And yet it is, and the Rex Organization is in the middle of that. And the foundation is playing an important role in helping to fund that process to assure that all of our children have excellent schools.
Most people know about the beginning of Rex and how Alexis was here, and we took advantage of that to have a parade, and that really set the organization off to be one of the main leaders in Mardi Gras in New Orleans. What a lot of people don't know that you discussed in your book was this issue of how the Rex Organization actually transformed Mardi Gras Day from being a rowdy, very unfocused day in the community to being something that had a lot of structure to it and brought a lot of attention to the city from around the world.
If you think about New Orleans at that time, although Rex may be synonymous with Carnival in the city, Carnival existed in New Orleans from the founding of the city. Carnival is an ancient celebration tied to Catholic calendar and ritual. The symbols of Carnival, the Boeuf Gras especially, go back to the Middle Ages. What happened in New Orleans was happening in the capitals of Europe and in other Catholic communities here in Mobile, for example. There was an organization, the Mystic Crew of Comus, formed in 1857 in New Orleans, and in fact they mounted really beautiful parades, nighttime parades, from that time through the founding of the Rex Organization. But the daytime celebration was disorganized. There were street organizations that paraded a bit or paraded in small groups, costumed, got rowdy, got drunk, got in trouble. The city fathers had a hard time keeping a handle on that, and they for a time considered even effectively making a daytime curfew to curb some of that. So there was celebrating going on, but there was nothing organized. Visitors started hearing about the Comus Parade, and in small numbers at least came to the city to see that. Rex founders, many of them members of Comus, all of them active community leaders, looked at this situation and said, you know, what can we do with this? Are there opportunities here? In fact, one of the few really firsthand descriptions we have of the early meetings that produced the Rex Organization comes from an interview that Louis Solomon, the first Rex, gave 50 years after the first parade. And he described how he and his buddies, and they were his friends, and they would get together after dinner, and I'm sure they would drink and they would talk and they would plan, and they cooked this up. And on very short notice, they put together the parade, but their motivation, as they described it, came when I think Solomon said that E.C. Hancock said, what about this carnival? Let's see if we can make something of it. And they made something of it. They set about to pull together a parade and did that with just a few weeks' notice. They sent Solomon off to raise $5,000. They thought that that's what it would cost to put together a parade. The Grand Duke was going to be there. That was part of it. But they really had a gleam in their eye about what this could become. They hoped, and they said as much, that if they put on a good party, they put on a good spectacle, it would attract more visitors to the city. Those visitors would go home and tell their friends, and their friends would tell their friends, and they'd start to reconnect New Orleans to the country and to the cities of commerce around the country that they had long had as their peers and their friends in both society and in commerce. That motivation was really critical to what Rex founders intended. New Orleans, we sometimes forget that New Orleans at that time was struggling to get back on her feet. Reconstruction did not treat New Orleans kindly. New Orleans was, prior to the Civil War, really one of the major cultural and commercial centers of the country, one of the top 2 or 3, and was really struggling to regain that connection to the centers of commerce and culture around the country. This was seen by the founders as an opportunity to do that, and they succeeded in ways I don't think they could have imagined, but it all started with that parade, and they had just a few weeks to put it together. It wasn't a parade like we see now. They really put out a word, basically, we're going to take control of the city, told the mayor and city council that they wanted the keys to the city, that they could disband the police force, and that the king was coming and he would take it over. They put out an invitation to those who wanted to decorate vans and wagons, bands that might want to march, costume groups that might want to join in. They ended up with a parade that was several miles long, totally organized compared to what was going on before. And it was the spectacle and the beginning of the spectacle of daytime carnival in New Orleans.
Well, you know, most people see the parades in New Orleans and they think that, that the royalty evolved from the Grand Duke's visit. And in your book, you discuss the ties that really went back to the carnival in Europe and carnival and other traditions around the world, and how we just took that and took it to a new level.
New Orleans had such close ties to Europe. Not only was it founded by French and Spanish settlers, but the young people went back and forth between New Orleans and Europe. The customs in New Orleans mirrored those in Paris. Had you been in Paris in 1872, you would have seen celebrations very much like the carnival balls that were held privately at that time. I think there's a special twist in New Orleans, though. I've always, if we look at the sort of costume balls that were held by private organizations and still are held by private organizations, they have all of the elements of a court entertainment or ball of that similar time in Europe. You might be invited to a special dance, a costume ball. Dancers would be masked. Special invitations and call-outs to dance at those balls. Special favors given to guests, and a monarch, and a court, and grand marches, and much bowing, and much waving of scepters, and much glitter, and much glamour, and much spectacle. And that was going on. That was going on in Europe, and I like to think that even though the New Orleanians of that period were happy to be here and happy to be in a democracy, perhaps this was their nod to the royalty they left behind. They created their own imaginary kingdoms and their own glittering realms and their own scepters and their own crowns, and royalty became part of the celebration of Carnival in New Orleans to a greater extent than anywhere else that I've been able to find the Carnival celebrated. You'll find floats, you'll find symbols like the jesters and the boeuf gras and all those things that we may have in common, but we really took the royalty part of this. And no better example of that than Rex, not just the king of Rex or the king of the Rex Organization, but the king of Carnival to rule over the whole celebration.